Hi friends! I think it's no secret to anyone that not every elderly person can afford to live a decent life after retiring. Unfortunately, it often happens that instead of a well-deserved rest, older people have to survive on a meager pension, living below the poverty line. Thus, some of them are forced to beg for alms, while those who are ashamed to do so try to find ways to earn a living. One of such people was an 88-year-old Russian woman who was willing to stand on the streets in any weather for days on end, selling her books, all so she could help her granddaughter get on her feet to give her a chance at a decent life. Vera Vasilievna, a former librarian, had once published a book of her own fairy tales. 2,000 copies had been printed 20 years ago, but unfortunately she never managed to sell them. First, Vera was shaken by her husband's death and had to forget about her books for a while, because she had to help her daughter and babysit her granddaughter. Unfortunately, that wasn't the last of Vera's misfortunes, and literally a couple of years later, her daughter had passed away too. Both her husband and her daughter died of cancer, and her granddaughter was now the only relative she had left. The young woman was already in college, and she was doing very well. And although the young woman was eligible to receive financial support from the government, the 8,000 rubles she got wasn't nearly enough to support herself, especially since half of that money was spent on renting an apartment. Thus, the grandmother decided to help her only granddaughter get on her feet, and that's why she ended up at the entrance to one of the city malls. The only idea the old woman could come up with at the time was to get out the boxes with the dusty fairy tale books and sell them. The persistent old lady went out every single day and tried to sell her books for a measly 30 rubles. The books were rather modestly decorated, and they only featured 3 black and white drawings, but they were very important to Vera. After all, it was her late daughter who made those illustrations. So, regardless of the weather, the old woman always stood in the same place, holding her book in her hands. Seeing the woman, not a single person had the audacity to call her a beggar, since she never once complained about her problems or begged for alms, but only stood there, proudly selling her books. Unfortunately, it's hard to impress modern kids with fairy tales, and thus her books weren't in high demand. Most of the people who bought them did so out of pity for the old woman. And we can't know how the old woman's life would have continued, because the world is not without good people. One day, a journalist came to shop at the same mall. It wasn't the first time she noticed the poor old lady selling her books, and thus she decided to learn a bit more about her. Having heard the story of Vera Vasilievna, the journalist decided to publish it. To everyone's surprise, the situation in which the elderly writer found herself made millions of people feel sorry for her, especially after they learned about her dream, which she held on to despite all the hardships. In her interview with the journalist, she mentioned that having sold all the books, she wanted to help her granddaughter and use the remaining money to publish a new batch of her books in memory of her late daughter. However, she needed over 500,000 rubles to do that, which was about $7,000. And it was then that changes started taking place in the life of the poor old woman. Her story resonated with people all over the country, and so much so that they joined efforts and opened a bank account for the old woman, where anyone could donate a certain amount to help Vera Vasilievna reach her goal. And it may be hard to believe, but in just a couple of weeks, they managed to raise twice the amount they aimed for. However, this still isn't the end. The director of the mall, next to which Vera Vasilievna sold her books, allocated a warm place for her, where she could sell her fairy tales whenever she wanted. That's when the desperate old lady turned into a local celebrity, getting featured in many TV shows and news stories. However, all of this was nothing compared to the fact that her granddaughter was ultimately able to live a decent life, which wouldn't have been possible without the help of her determined grandmother, who never gave up and took matters into her own hands. Unfortunately, soon after the story of this woman spread around the country, Vera Vasilievna passed away. She refused to go to the hospital for treatment. She was obsessed with finishing the last book, and it was her dedication to her writing that caused her death. Vera Vasilievna never loved anyone or anything as much as her granddaughter, and thus, in memory of her grandmother, the granddaughter promised to publish her books. I don't think I need to reiterate how much the old lady deserved it, because at 88, she didn't choose to beg for alms, nor did she choose to simply give up, but accepted her life's challenges with honor and integrity. I am sure that every city has its own Vera Vasilievna. These people stand near public transport stops or at the store entrance. They sell trinkets, usually for a penny, and that's not because they have nothing to do at home, but because they refuse to give up, and they definitely still have something or someone to fight for. So friends, if you ever come across such people, Don't just pass them by. Buy whatever it is they're selling, because the little money you'll lose can make a huge impact on the lives of these people. I don't know what else to say. Just take care of yourself and your loved ones. Rate this video and see you soon. Bye.